by age.
You mean order to ask
For the
questions?
Q&A.
or
Yeah,
order
Ask
to-
questions for you. How are you gonna?
Oh, I think
There's no
I'll
order
go
to the
here,
witnesses.
and then here, and then there, and then there, and then there. No, I'll start at this end because there's more.
While we wait for all of the witnesses to return to their seats, a few other announcements, as you've heard them before if you've been here, but if not, there will be a documentary produced for theatrical release based in part on the hearings. That documentary is titled Truth Embargo, to be released later this year.
Yo te digo de que el teléfono americano va a solicitar
I think what we're going to do, because I'm going to start with Carolyn.
Over the lunch break, which is scheduled for 12:15 to 1:45, the main ballroom will be available for members of the media to conduct interviews with both members of the committee and witnesses for the entire week.
No, we're bound. I'd like to call the witnesses to the table. This is going to be a question and answer session, so if we can get the witnesses here.
Damn, I lost my pronunciation.
I don't know where the rest of the committee is, but I don't see them. We'll start without them.
But not without the witness.
But we need all the witnesses. We can't start without the witnesses. Thank you.
Joe, do you have another one of those sheets with the pronunciation?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't have a single one, actually.
I had it all. I'm trying to be. Let's see. I didn't sign it this way, so it's got to be here somewhere.
Once again, a reminder to please turn off your cell phones or anything that might be a distraction to anyone else in the ballroom. We'd appreciate that. Also appreciate it if you check with your neighbor to be sure theirs is off as well.
We'll just put it right there and I can.
We're just missing one of our witnesses now, A.J. Grivard. A.J. Grivard from Brazil, if you could return to the hearing room, we'd appreciate it. If anyone knows A.J. and could go find him, we'd appreciate that as
He
well.
was in the cafe place.
Ah, he's dining. Okay, it looks like a couple of people have run off for him.
There had, there's kind of a round table going in on back there.
So someone has to go get him, I guess. That's where I saw him. Gerard, pueden irlo a buscar, está en el restaurante. Yeah.
Yeah, we could start without all of our members. We can't start without all of yours.
There he is.
There we go.
Además, sí. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. This meeting will come back to order. I am going to start out to my right with Congresswoman Woolsey, and this will be the time to ask questions of our witnesses.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, witnesses. What a morning.
What a morning.
Good morning, but what a morning. There is hardly any way to deny, unless you are all sitting here making up stories of how absolute your proof is to what's going on beyond our own earth. And so thank you for that. That was good for all of us.
Welcome.
My first question is to our wonderful pilot, Santa Maria. You're Peru, you're Argentina. Okay, I think I want.
Peru.
Yeah.
Peru.
You were the pilot, and then you.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, do you have I think it's to the gentleman at the end of the table. Do you have any kind of a formal relationship, your UFO group, with your Argentina government? And what is it, the Argentine government, and what is it, and how does it work, and what can we learn from that?
Well, all the groups in Argentina, the civilian groups, create a Sephora. And Sephora had been is unite researchers for many, many years who were my colleagues and close associates. Some they were disciples of myself. I started researching UFOs many years ago, and we always look for the classification as from the 70s to now. The group found the cooperation now of the Air Force through the Minister of the Defense and through the executive power of the nation. We are waiting to kind of unify that motion. Now it's working also. We have a petition in the Congress of the nation. We have with executive power and also with the Minister of Defense to have release documentations from the past. But there were projects, as I said in my speech. I don't know, maybe the translation was not so good.
No, it's good.
Okay. Of these projects and the projects, not only to release, also to have cooperation. To have cooperation and what the field researchers, we always work alone with no mediums to get to the places, to do good analysis. We really, the groups kind of prevail so many decades with the lack of technical support to do analysis. We have, for example, since the 2000, we have the phenomenon, for example, of the cattle mutilations, which is a very serious, we know through Linda Moulton, her research.
And
For example, the groups need support. It's not only to have the classification as documents who could give light for scientific analysis and to see what happened also in documents and cases, the Army forces and the Air Force and the Navy research between 1960, as I explained, and today. But there were recent cases too, as I said, in 2011 was this big explosion.
Well, I know you need the information. Are they giving it to you, or are you just helping them?
The classification started slowly, yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually happening.
It's happening right now, yes.
Yes.
It's
Thank
happening
you
now.
for sharing that
Yes.
with us. Thank you. Colonel Santa Maria, I can't imagine your experience. There's so much, I mean, I felt like I was sitting on your shoulder when you were telling the story. Afterward, how did your government treat you? Did they take your information and take it seriously? How could they not? But did they? And did you see any life in those UFOs?
No, el ovni era una superficie
UFO
que no permitía. Okay,
Can you wait a minute?
okay.
I forgot. I forgot how limited I am. Okay, please.
we could not actually see into the UFO, not through the ceramic part or the metallic part. As regards the government and the Air Force, the 1,800 people that actually saw it and the commanders that were there, we reported all of this to the Air Forces, but there was no negative repercussions because it was officially accepted. The sighting was officially accepted, and I continued to fly for 20 more years without any problems.
So how did the press handle this? And, I mean, what was their response?
In 1980, when this event happened, this was a year that on that air base we were installing a civil war we were installing Soviet materials or Soviet installations at that place, and the UFO did not actually get to fly over the base, and so really we received the order to not talk about this because we didn't actually want any curious journalists to come and actually research and investigate this, because we had sensitive materials on the base and we didn't want to attract any undue attention. And so it was 22 years of silence until the Air Force officially gave us permission to talk about these phenomena, and that's at that time when they said that we could actually start to speak publicly about this issue. And as I said, they finally gave me the authorization to talk about this.
And did the press come back by belittling the effort, or did they acknowledge it and support it?
The media started to talk about this secret that we had kept for so many years, but they didn't really know how to get access to the information from the Air Force offices, and so the media occasionally would interview me or request an interview just to try to get the word out about this, but it was so many years later that there wasn't a whole lot.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So, Mr. Gerard,
Yes, ma'am?
can I take these off?
Yes, yeah, I only speak in English. Yeah.
Thank you. And believe me, it's because I'm limited. You referred to American military in the Amazon. How soon did that happen, and what's the relationship there?
The facts that I described happened in the 70s, in late 70s, in 77, and Brazil was, like many other countries in South America, under military dictatorship. And during that period of time, U.S. military and intelligence were all over South America, ruling lots of things there. Now, when Operation Saucer took place, and it happened because the populations of the affected area couldn't live anymore because they were seeing UFOs all the time, and worse than that, they were being attacked. Over 1,000 people were attacked during a certain period of time. There were lots of injuries made by this object that would come from the sky and emit a beam of light towards people's body, making them faint and become anemic. Now, the situation went so intense that the community leaders went to the governor of the state of Pará to ask that something is done about it. And the government asked the Brazilian Air Force to start an investigation to give answers to the population, to the society. Then it was established the Operation Saucer to investigate and to engage the extraterrestrial intelligences, because there was already, and this is in the documents, there was already a knowledge that there was an intelligence beyond that phenomena, and that phenomena was not earthly. Now, when Operation Saucer started as a military operation with all the military system and style, during its procedures that lasted 4 months, and the way it was closed is very interesting. But during this 4 months, U.S. military, U.S. intelligence were visiting those areas and taking part of the operations during the Operation Saucer. And they were talking to the witnesses during the day and sky watching the night with full equipments to try to detect and film the UFOs that were being seen. Now, it was said to me by the commander of the Operation Saucer that at the beginning, in the first weeks, only a few sightings took place. But after the Operation Saucer went on, the objects would come more and more boldly and to the direction of the areas where the military were camping.
So, was the U.S. military part of that saucer project with you?
Not officially.
Were they at the table?
Not officially. They took part in lots of procedures, including, this was told to me by the commander of the Operation Saucer himself, Colonel William Giolanda, that they were having problem in documenting the UFOs with photographs. Some UFOs were hard to photograph, but they solved this problem when the U.S. military came to Brazil and gave to the Brazilian military some equipments and highly sensitive films so they can not only photograph the UFOs, over 500 pictures were made, and also film the UFOs. 16 hours of film were made of including motherships over the Amazon River.
So do you have any idea of whether or not that information and those films were shared here in the United States?
I don't have that information. I truly believe
would it have been all right? I mean, was there some embargo in their relationship with you that would say you can't take our information back?
No, I think that the whole thing about the cooperation with the Americans is that they take the information back to the United States.
Okay.
You know, they were there to collect information, as they were in Argentina, in Chile, in so many countries, to get information about those phenomena and bring back to the United States to use for their own purposes.
Well, thank you very much. So, Mr. Junios, did I say it right?
Yeah.
All right, I had a question for you. Is this bad enough? Okay, here we are. You mentioned that the traffic control group, I mean, was housed in the Air and Space Museum.
Currently, yes.
Oh, okay. But it started out in another...
Yes, the Technical School of Aeronautics.
Right.
That was the office initially, and
Well, when you told me that when you told us that it had been taken from one area to another, when I heard museum, I got a little concerned that it was saying this is all past, and you're not going to be working on
no, what
current
it is,
and future.
it's not in the museum itself. It's in the Museum of the Aeronautics. It's in an old airport. It used to be the main airport, Los Cerrillos, but what happened, like it happened in many cities, as the city grew too much, and also was done when the runways were smaller. So eventually the airport, or Los Cerrillos, is no longer functioning as an airport, but they're still using the hangars and things, and they created a museum. But the facilities of the committee, the CFAA, are annexed. But it has nothing to do with the museum.
So it worked for convenience. It
for
worked for you.
Yeah.
All right.
They also have an office at the main headquarters of the Civil Aviation Agency, but according to what General Bermudez told me, they'd rather be at that other place, he said, because when they are in the headquarters, if they have to make an official presentation or something, of course, they can use that facility. He said, everybody's asking them questions. Oh, what's going on with UFOs? Have you seen any? So he said, we're in the other place, nobody bothers them. They can work quietly and do their job.
All right. I thank you, and I thank you all. My time is up.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Kilpatrick, who is Congresswoman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to start with you, Mr. Trapp, but I think I will. I think you're the first that I've heard in 4 days who said the presence of the others actually attacked people that caused the Operation Saucer project to come into existence. Is that right?
That's right.
I don't think I've heard that before. Certainly haven't
Perhaps
heard it
not.
in America. Matter of fact, it probably happened. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. We just haven't heard it reported like that. What year did Operation Saucer start?
I'm sorry.
What year?
Oh, it started in September 1977.
And how long
and
did it
it
last?
ended on December 1977. It took 4 months only.
Okay, okay. And you also mentioned in this from Congresswoman Woolsey, the U.S., did you say they took your information and you were waiting to hear back from them, or something you were saying about, I don't know if maybe you supplied the information from Brazil in this instance, and then they were to report back or something? I don't know. What was your relationship with the United States of America? And this is for all of you all. The information on your presence, your UFOs, your whatever that's being called, what relationship, if any, did you have with the U.S. government, and did you forward or share any information from your country with the U.S. government?
Me personally?
No, Brazil.
Oh, Brazil, of course.
Brazil, all of it
Well,
for your country. I mean,
see,
for your country.
Yes, there is a common sense that the U.S. government is acting in many places of the world.
It's what?
Is working, operating in many places of the world, collecting information about this subject. It is reported that the U.S. military have been to several countries collecting information about UFOs. Now, we just saw when Commander Santa Maria presented his case, a document that shows that the U.S. intelligence was getting informed of what happened in La Jolla Air Force Base in Peru. The same thing happened in Brazil. During many years, we have had U.S. military coming down to Brazil and taking part of investigations of UFOs. And it's not only in the past, like 4 or 5 decades ago, but also in recent cases.
Okay,
now,
stop. Okay. That's sort of. Can each of you respond to that? Mr. Hunis, and we'll go right down the line. Just want to know what relationship, if any, does U.S. have with your experiences and your acts of what we're discussing this week? I mean, do you automatically give it to them? Is it because we have military bases there? Is it because you may get appropriations from us that you must share this? What reason and
Well,
what is that connection?
In the case of the CFA, in fact, General Bermudez told me that when they created the office back in the late 90s, they contacted the American government, I guess through the embassy, because they wanted to have some kind of formal relationship. But there was no response.
They did not respond. What
No,
year, what
but
year
they
was
do,
that?
that would have been probably late 90s. But they do have an agreement with not an official group, but it's called NARCAP. I think it stands for National Aviation Research Center for Anomalous Phenomena, something like
Located where?
Well, it's run by a former NASA scientist, a very serious man called Dr. Richard Haynes, and he is an expert on aviation cases. He's a longtime NASA scientist, very serious. So he's lectured, he's gone to Chile, they have very close relationship because he's an expert on aviation cases, and the CFAA is run by the Civil Aviation. So, but NARCAP is not an official agency of the U.S. government.
It sounds like a nonprofit of some sort, and we've had
Correct.
some testimony here to that effect on our U.S. side that would probably equal that.
Correct. So the other thing is what my colleague Jevaer was mentioning. If you study the American declassified UFO files, which are extensive, you will see a tremendous amount of documents, especially back in the old days, but there's still some more recent, collected by various agencies, usually through the Defense Attaché Office, or sometimes by the CIA. And it's obviously that these people are, monitoring the international aspect of UFOs.
And does Peru get information back from the U.S. regarding any of what you send them?
Well, I cannot speak for Peru. In the case of Chile,
Chile.
There might
Excuse me,
be some
Chile.
at the level of intelligence. They probably do,
Chile.
but then that is not revealed publicly. You
Okay.
see, what General Bermudez wanted was to have a formal.
I understand.
But because of the transparency law, that would have had to be revealed publicly. So the
Okay.
U.S. just did
Okay.
not just never responded.
That's Brazil, Chile. Colonel Sanchez, could you respond?
En el caso de Uruguay no tenemos ninguna relación de intercambio con Estados Unidos, no existe.
Exchange relationship with the United States.
Do you share any of your information, as you testified to us this morning, with U.S. or any nonprofit or other entity that may not be government? Do you share any of that with the U.S. government or a nonprofit or an agency here in our country that would know what Uruguay has experienced?
No, not with any civilian or military agency or U.S. government agency. There is no sharing or exchange of information.
Dr. I want to say Choi, is that right? No.
Bueno, en realidad,
Well, the truth is that one of the conclusions you can draw after having heard the testimony of all the witnesses is that the UFO phenomenon is one of national security, and therefore the intelligence element is extremely important. As far as we understand, in Peru, there is no open formal public agreement, but there are indications that show that some of this information is shared with U.S. security agencies. There's no open public documents, but there are witnesses who have noted that in the 80s, apparently a UFO fell in the San Mateo de Huancho area, and they said that there were Americans who were in that area. And I do want to remind you that in the Greer Disclosure Project, there were people who made statements, gave testimony that stated that there was a U.S. Sergeant, Jonathan Wengen, who said that a UFO had crashed in northern Peru and that there was extraction, and this was according to testimony, that they took some of the remains of this fallen UFO. They were taken away by helicopters that were definitively not part of the Peruvian armed forces.
Not part of Peru, taken away in helicopters. What country was that who took them?
de acuerdo al
Based on the testimony from this Captain Stephen Greer's project, apparently they were American helicopters, and because then that these materials were taken back to the United States.
I'm going to change for Colonel Santa Maria. You're a brave man to go up and down, back and forth, zip, zip, with something you don't know what it is, and you're trying to shoot it. That's pretty brave. I want to commend you for all of that. You did get away clean and free and healthy. That's a good thing, and thank you very much. I'm not sure I want to ask you that same question. I do want to go to Argentina and ask the same question. Do you, Argentina, share either with government or non-government organizations any of your experience, any of the things that you've witnessed to us today with the United States of America, either through its government or other nonprofits or unaffiliated?
Pretty sure, I am sure there's some kind of no open communication, but it's possible. But officially, I don't see any kind of document or interaction between
The two. Okay.
Argentina government and
Nothing official.
U.S. agencies, yeah,
Okay.
officially. But regarding, we were talking, also was a very interesting case I researched in the decade of 70, 78. There was a UFO crash between Argentina and Bolivia. And supporting what Dr. Choi said, was an object who produced a kind of destruction of a hill, was a kind of cigar-shaped structure of no identified And the Bolivian government studied, the Argentinian wasn't limited, didn't investigate, but that object was retrieved by Americans' helicopters too.
Oh, stop.
Yes.
Okay. You have no relationship with them, but in that instance,
Right.
and in other instances around the
Right,
around
it's
the
the
table,
border, right.
we have been on the scene at some of your current experiences.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Goes back. I want to go back to Dr. Choi for just a moment. Your point was well made in terms of national security. So, do you all in South America share your information and experiences and enhance or whatever your national security because of what you see and how closely you live together? And just one person, and I don't know.
There is an agreement at the level of military in all South America. They share information about a wide variety of subjects, of items, and UFOs is one of them. It has been confirmed by top-ranking military in Brazil and in other countries. It means, in the military level, which is it's independent than the politics. There is.
Did you say independent of politics?
Of politics, because presidents can come and go,
Right.
but the military stay. And as they stay, they have to have a channel of communication among themselves, so they can talk about interests of each other on off the
That
continent
applies in this
itself.
country too. We just don't acknowledge it as such. It does.
Something like that.
Presidents change, but the military-industrial complex is alive and well and
Yes.
continues so. Yeah.
Right. I'd
Okay,
like to add
wait,
that.
just a minute. Just one last question. I've got 1 minute. So therefore, South America, I believe this is an international issue and that we ought to go back to our Congresses and others, but I also think we ought to have UN presence, and there's been some. Will your countries help the citizens hearing on disclosure go to the UN to ask for their help in this subject, and will your countries help petition us with that?
Yes.
Yes, of course. It's what we want. We
That's
would
what-
like. We
You
would
didn't
like.
say it. You didn't say it. I want to hear it. Okay, that's good. No,
Yes.
no. I think that's good. That's what we want to hear.
Because
Thank you.
these official agencies, they want a place where their data can be shared officially with other countries, because the UFO phenomenon, by definition, is global.
Right.
Like I said, they don't care about national boundaries.
They
That's
care
our
about
problem.
national security, though, and technology. So, I mean, it's got to be a way to do it, I think, and you all may know better, and so certainly more people in this room know better than I.
Well, that is the problem, because as you know, in Congress, I'm sure you've dealt with many issues dealing with intelligence and national security. There's all kinds of things going on under the rug, I mean, informally. Intelligence agencies, they have their own procedures, but those are not made public.
Okay, stop, please.
Yeah.
The United States of America knows of your instances. You all said that, most of you. They don't tell us. They know yours. And then they make mockery of it as now
Well,
it doesn't
because
exist.
the U.S.
Okay,
government
my time
doesn't
is out. I
acknowledge.
yield.
Yeah.
I yield back. I know, but we got to get to what we got to get to. I want you all to know, and I commend you for all that you do and that you work together. But if our military gets your information and does whatever it does with it, and I hope to make a better world and a better global presence so that we all might live the next 50 years, that we also work together to do that. I'm not so sure. Some work with you and some don't. We got to open it up. We got to address it, or there will be no universe. You all understand?
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Representative Cook.
Thank you. Chair, I'd like to turn to Colonel Santa Maria for a moment. This Department of Defense memo that's stamped in June of 1980, that was, I guess you actually showed this up on the screen, also is attached to your testimony, or your story, I should say. And then, of course, you testified about this. Is this memo referring directly to your experience that was indeed, as someone's already said, very dramatic and had what we call here, and I think everywhere, the wow factor to it? Is this the memo that relates to, that's to you? And are you prohibited from telling us or something? But it sounds like this happened in April. This is something with the June stamp on it. It looks like our Joint Chiefs of Staff. Confirm, if you can. The Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States of America have made these comments, or at least received these comments, from Peru, and we have this in writing as a document that talks about these very experiences of shooting at UFOs, with the statement, I have to say it here, that the source has been known as credible before, in all respects. In other words, what you experienced was not even questioned by people, and copies of this, CIA, a National Security Agency, I could go on. I mean, is this a smoking gun or what for trying to open up some files here in the United States? I mean, but now I want to hear your answer. Because it sounds, well, whether it was you or not, something very similar to what you said happened. It looks like in April or May, so I'm thinking it might be you they're talking about here. Go ahead.
In 2007, in this same building, I was invited to take part in a conference on the declassification of documents. There was a journalist, Edwin Kane, and there was a filmmaker, James Fox, who was making a documentary. And they turned over a copy of this document to me, and they said, we would like to invite you to our country because our country has accredited this encounter. And so when I reviewed the data in 1980, the only encounter with a UFO was my encounter. And so the date of this memorandum was about 28 days later. So there were no other occurrences at the same base. So I believe in the sharing of information, you can see that this was the event being referred to.
Everybody in this room to hear that even though, again, we have a humble observer that doesn't like to in any way overstate anything, that was a really strong yes to my question.
It was.
There's no other way to interpret that. And I appreciate that. And I have to say, since the way you described this, and the fact that you actually shot, I'm going to use the word bullets. I know that that's not the right word. I'm not much in knowledge of Air Force weaponry and so on, but you shot at this. And are you a good are you a good target? Are you a good marksman? I don't know the right word to use.
It's not a target.
No. Obviously, you shot at this. And would you repeat again what happened?
Well, these were 22 minutes of this in relationship where we went up and down and we went around. It was trying to avoid me. I was pursuing it. And I was trying to fire. When I first fired, these were bursts of 30 millimeter shells. So they're about 3 centimeters wide, 25 centimeters long, and they can destroy a truck, a single one. And there were 64, so it was just a barrage of fire, and nothing happened at all. And that's what was so surprising. Now, if the possibility of not hitting my target, it was practically impossible. I've won awards for marksmanship. So I have won some shooting contests, and so they were like, hey, you're the one who needs to go up there. You're the one who needs to chase this thing. And this is how we're trying.
Well, in the way you're explaining this, please. Because he took a little too long to say, hey, he wouldn't really have missed this. Now, he didn't say it that way. He said it more carefully, but there's no question. You wouldn't have missed it based on everything you said and based on how those 30 caliber shells, as you've described, would have taken out a truck. I mean, you didn't even have to be a great shot, but they picked you because of your ability to shoot at something they were worried about coming in on the airbase. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
As far as what happened after you shot the way you did at it.
Well, so I shot these bursts. In our training, we are always firing on 3 meter by 3 meter targets. And in this case, this was a 10 meter by 10 meter objective target. So, I mean, the possibility of missing was zero. I mean, these hit the object, and when it started to move away, I put on my post-combustion so that I could chase it, to maneuver, to try to get in position. But it's this mental exercise of how am I going to do this? And when it was moving away, I thought, how is it doing this? How can I better attack it? So I tried different positions until it came to the point when it had supersonic speed. When it would go up, I tried to get in my sights vertically. But when I moved to the side of the UFO at 1.3 Mach, the UFO, which was stopped, it achieved 1.2 Mach in a question of seconds without any engines. This is something that no craft can do, to just go from 0 to 1.2 Mach vertically to reach my same position. This is a UFO that knew the way our aircraft worked, because it was able to anticipate my moves and then follow me. And then once I landed, I met with intelligence officers, and we looked at all catalogs to see what possible spy objects this might have been. But they all had some type of engine. There was nothing similar to what I had observed. So this was an unidentified object, and we were unaware of any type of technology on Earth that existed. Will you allow me to make a comment?
Of course. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Perhaps because the commander is so humble, he has not expressed certain details, but I wanted to share something that I believe that you should know and I should underscore.
I'd ask the colonel to nod his head yes on any detail where either yes or no, just to be sure that he's, because I agree. One of the problems is you have not a problem, in my opinion, but you have somebody that does not like to in any way bring attention to himself or overstate his own abilities or what he did. Just description that's denied by our Joint Chiefs of Staff was amazing. I just want him to confirm what you say, because I do want to believe that it would be useful to this panel to have him acknowledge anything you say that would add to that. Go ahead.
One of the things that we have heard in previous days is the possibility that many of these UFO events are due to earthly craft. But in the case of Colonel Santa Maria, we can prove that this was not any technology we see here on Earth. In the military terminology, there was a wall of fire, basically, that this object came up against. There's nothing on Earth that could defend itself against that, specifically in that time. Not even up to date. Not because it was able to only defend itself, but as the colonel stated, you asked him what was the impact that it had on that. There was no impact. It absorbed all of these rounds. It actually absorbed it. That is absolutely impossible for any Earth or any technology that we have here on Earth to be able to absorb that type of barrage.
Do you agree with the 2 or 3 important points there that Dr. Choi just made?
Sí, estoy de acuerdo porque
Yes, I do agree, because over time, we have talked about the possible situations and the different perspectives that exist. Obviously, I fired, and there should have been some sort of impact, but there was nothing. There was no, the bullets didn't even explode. There was no explosion of the barrage of what I was firing. So it just absorbed it.
I'd love to continue with this, but I do need to ask another question here with just a minute on my time left.
We have 1 minute left.
That's right. That's why I said I'd like to go over here to Colonel Sanchez. Your system in Uruguay that apparently has been in existence for 33 years, you say, that to track and keep track of anything that's cited. It's called, I can't remember the operation name of it, or the, excuse me, let me grab my notes. I was so mesmerized by the previous testimony. But the system you have, where you outlined the 5 or 6 steps to even get qualified to be seriously looked at, and then tracked as far as any UFO sightings that your organization in Uruguay keeps track of. Do you have records of things similar to what we've just been talking about with Colonel Santa Maria? And I'm not sure if Peru and Uruguay, they do have the same language, don't they? Well, you obviously heard everything anyway, but through these translations. So I'd like to know anything that might be in that, that kind of talks about this sort of thing. And since I'll be out of time, if you keep your answer somewhat short, but go ahead.
Yes, we, for the last 33 years, have had an Air Force commission that also is accountable to the public on all issues dealing with UFOs. This commission also has military and civilian members, and also does have archives of 1,300 cases that had been investigated, 3% of which, there are 39 or 40 cases now, that have not been solved because of the level of bizarreness that they presented, and Uruguay has scientifically addressed the UFO issue and does not rule out the extraterrestrial element, but for this we do need scientific evidence. We do have cases such as that which Colonel Santa Maria mentioned, and how fighter jets were scrambled to chase these objects, and how there was a chase, an in-air chase, and following glowing objects, and sometimes they would get close to, and how these objects would get close to air bases throughout Latin America.
Thank you.
A wise course, by the way.
Thank you.
Trust but verify.
Senator?
Thank you. I'd like to start with our colleague from Brazil.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the government responded from an investigatory point of view to the apparent violent attacks that took place in the Amazon area, killing people. Now, that's the first, at least that I'm aware of, anywhere in the world, where an aggressive attack resulting in loss of life that was the product of a flying saucer extraterrestrial effort. Could you elaborate a little bit more specifically on the investigation that was made over the death of these people?
Yes, sir. We don't know for what reason that took place, but that happened. During 2 or 3 years, like 1976, 77, 78, we had casualties, at least 4 casualties. And we have a record of 400 people attacked. Not only people, but also animals were attacked by these beams of light that would come from these balls, these spaceships. Sometimes they were referred to like a can with a windshield and 2 persons, 2 human-like creatures inside of it, operating. that spaceship. This has been described in detail by lots of people who live in the area of Salgado, especially in the island of Colares, which is 60 or 70 miles from the city of Belém. And this has also been reported by the military. Now, the very interesting thing about it is that when the military decided to camp there and to conduct their investigations, the attacks stopped. Very rare attacks took place in other areas, but not where the military were. And also, when the military decided to change their camping from one point of the island to another point of the island, the objects that would be hovering those previous point, that previous point where the operations were taking place, would move to the other area, like it, in the own words of the commander of the Operation Saucer, Yolanda, like if these intelligences knew what the military were doing in that area. That's very amazing. These are only 440 pages of a total of 2,000 pages that were produced as a result of the Operation Saucer. I would like to address this to you. I would like that you have time to examine this, because this contained very hard information collected in a military fashion by military men on duty investigating UFO in a confidential, not top secret, but confidential, sometimes reserved operation by the Brazilian Air Force in the Amazon.
Has the military who've been in charge of this investigation, have they been transparent with the public in Brazil?
As I told before, on that days we are under military dictatorship, so there wasn't much transparency.
Presently, after the dictatorship left.
Yes. The gentleman that conducted the Operation Saucer, the commander of it, was a captain at that time, and he retired as a colonel. And 20 years after the Operation Saucer was shut down, this man called me and invites me to his place, to his house in Rio de Janeiro, where he was living, and I spent 2 days with him, interviewing him extensively, where he gave me full details of everything that happened during those 4 months. And he also described me how he and his men had a close encounter with the creatures that came in those objects. And that actually, this main encounter with an alien creature that took place in mid-December 1977 was what caused the Operation Saucer to be shut down. And in my reading of it is because the Brazilian military wouldn't know what to do if this contacts, open contacts among military and extraterrestrial start being regular in the Amazon. What we can do now. So then the Operation Saucer was shut down. But just to add a few more pieces of information, that it was only, as to say, shut down to make pretend, because the Operation Saucer then became, in a second level, much more secret and was conducted for several more months under military, U.S. military command in Brazilian territory.
Well, I think you partially answered the next question, was that was there a U.S. presence interfacing with your military in the investigation of these UFOs?
Yes, sir.
You have documentary evidence of that?
I have the reports given to me by the commander of the Operation Saucer that he interacted many, many times with Brazilian intelligence agents members and U.S. intelligence
Which would be the CIA.
That will be the CIA and also military. They will be all over the Amazon looking for the same kind of information that we are looking for about who are those intelligences that pilot those machines.
Do you not find that somewhat bizarre that our government now officially says that there's no investigation that we were involved with, no documentation?
I would say that is more than bizarre.
Okay. Let me move on to my...
See, even our government is admitting in a far extent that there has been official investigation. Now, we started in Brazil in 2004 a movement, a campaign called UFOs Freedom of Information Now, to request to the government to open its files. And we have succeeded. It's the only model like this in this planet where the society have asked its government to come clear about it, and it came, at least partially, because we have got from 2008 to 2010, not only 4,500 pages of UFO document, but also like 300 to 400 pictures of UFOs. This is all given to the society. Has all been put in the National Archives. Anybody can go to the National Archives in Brasilia or in Rio and see this.
Was there panic in the streets when this was revealed?
Not at all. Not for a single minute.
So the people were mature enough to accept this knowledge?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me go to my friend from Chile. Do you have any knowledge of American military presence or intelligence presence interfacing with the officials in Chile gathering information on UFOs?
Not really, except if you look historically, some of the FOIA documents released by the CIA or the defense, usually was the defense attaché office, that they would, if there was a very important case, they would send those guys to collect the information. But so historically, in some of the release files, there are occasionally some documents about Chile, but not recently. So I have not seen. And like I said, General Bermudez, the head of the committee, actually wanted to have a relationship, but he wanted to be open and official.
And so, we didn't want that.
No, we didn't want that.
So that says a lot. With respect, and you've drafted, or you've worked with Danny Sheehan in drafting a resolution that can come from this body trying to refer this matter to the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Yeah, because there has to be a mechanism, like I said on the first day in this hearing.
Could you circulate that document as soon as possible to the members so we can begin to digest it? Okay.
Okay. Although we have really not. This is a kind of thing that we
realize
need to
it's
discuss,
a draft,
but we will give you the draft.
We're all very sophisticated in dealing with drafts and first writings, but we can massage something as long as we have something in our hands.
Okay.
Let me go to my colleague from Uruguay. Did I understand you correctly that your system of investigation has been transparent and open to the public from the very beginning? Did I understand that properly?
Sí, eso es correcto. De hecho, es correcto. De hecho, Uruguay ha publicado a través de esta comisión un libro que yo traje aquí para mostrarles con más de 20 casos de Uruguay, casos oficiales, escrito por el primer presidente de este grupo, el coronel Eduardo Aguirre, que escribió este libro hace 11 años. Fue publicado para que el público se mantenga informado de toda la actividad
so that the public could follow all of the ufological activity in Uruguay. There are also press conferences, and the information is even taken to the schools to talk to them about this and even educate them on this issue. This commission is made up by both civil and military members. It has a work methodology that is designed or that was adopted in 1979, and this methodology was also shared with China.
This was brought to the schools so it could be educated to the young people of your country? Is that correct?
Sí.
Yes, that's correct. The UFO issue is something that everybody likes to hear about, especially young people, at least in Uruguay. And they request the Air Force, they request that the Air Force go and give talks to the kids. and they go to many different places.
To you in
Muchas
that
gracias.
regard.
Thank
I think I still have some time, don't I?
you. You have 1 minute?
1 minute. Quickly, Dr. Cho and Colonel Santa Maria, when the U.S. helicopter, retrieved the materials from the downed UFO aircraft, was there no reaction to a violation of your sovereignty by the United States of America, or do you just accept these kind of violations as a matter of course?
Bueno, en realidad.
Actually, this information, well, we just recently learned about this based on the disclosure project that Stephen Greer carried out based on the testimony that a military official, Jordan Wink, provided. This was circulated in the UFO groups in Peru. It never made it to the press in Peru. And the press is the same here as it is in Peru. They don't really talk about it. And so the media generally try to cover up any type of thing like this. And so so the government doesn't really give importance to this, and they just say, well, we're just gonna keep it in the corner here, and they're just gonna say that there wasn't a real invasion of sovereignty.
From the Uruguayan approach to the issue. Colonel Santa Maria, who gave the order to shoot? Was that your own initiative, or did it come from higher headquarters as you were selected and taking off?
The order was to intercept and destroy, because this is something that could invade our airspace.
That's right. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think my time has expired,
Your time
so I
has
can't get to
expired.
Argentina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will go to Representative Bartlett.
Thank you very much. First, I want to apologize for my tardiness. This is National Day of Prayer in the United States, and for a long time, I had been scheduled to be the main speaker at a county-wide National Day of Prayer breakfast this morning, and so I fulfilled that obligation, came here so soon as I could. We have your testimony then. Thank you all very, very much. While our military and our government is saying that there's no such thing as no possibility of a UFO coming from another world, they, of course, admit that there are UFOs. UFO simply means unidentified flying object, and the Air Force says that in their Project Blue Book, there were 701 of them that they couldn't wish away some way or another. So they do admit they're unidentified flying objects. They simply are denying categorically, I think, that they could be of extraterrestrial origin. But while they seem to poo-poo the whole thing here and relegate it to the ha-ha corner, they apparently are aggressive in participating in investigations of USO sightings in South America. And I'd just like to start here with Mr. Guevara and go down the table. Have you tell each of us briefly, is this true in your country, and to what extent?
Yes, it is. Actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak about crashes. It has been said here in this table and during the precedent years, days, that crashes of UFOs have happened, most of them in old days, but there is at least one recent crash, and it took place in Brazil in 1996. It is called the Virginia case, in which an alien spacecraft crashed and at least 2 creatures were captured and offered no resistance to its capture, but they died right after they were captured. And this procedure were taken of rescuing the debris of the UFO and capturing the creatures were taken both by the fire department of the city of Virginia with the army personnel of nearby headquarters. And in the next day, the following day of the capture, we already knew that U.S. intelligence and U.S. military, and as well as U.S. doctors were sent by the U.S. consulate in São Paulo to the city of Varginha to follow the procedures. The doctors were sent, medical doctors from the United States, to follow what was being done about the creatures, because they died and nobody could explain how were their morphology, how they function. And we know for a fact, because this is a very well documented case that has been investigated by at least 70 UFO researchers, including UFO researchers from the United States, as Dr. Roger Lear, Dr. James Hurtak, and the deceased Dr. John Mack from the Harvard University. They've been to Brazil. They confirmed what the UFO researchers from Brazil discovered. And we know for a fact that at least one of those two creatures were taken to the United States by U.S. military, and it was taken in one of the Buffalo airplanes that serve the U.S. embassies and consulates in South America. When it came back to the United States, it brought back to here one of the creatures and part of the object that crashed, that were rescued, that were retrieved by the Brazilian military. Yes.
Yes. Well, in Chile, I don't have really much information about other than what I said earlier, that there were some documents, from the CIA, but they tend to be old. But I do want to bring up a case that was mentioned by my colleague Chanetti, which happened in Bolivia, and we don't have anybody from Bolivia here, so I'll speak briefly about that case because I'm familiar with, and it's a crash too that took place in Tarija, which is on the border of Bolivia and Argentina in May of 1978. In this case, we do have some documents, not Majestic 12 type documents, which are controversial, but these are officially released documents under the Freedom of Information Act, including a telex from Secretary of State Cyrus Vance at the time. And also Air Force officers from the Defense Attaché Office under a project that was called Project Moondust, which is well established that existed, which was for the recovery of space objects. I mean, that's how they started. As soon as the space age took off, in 1957, then the Air Force created this project Moondust for the recovery of space debris. But according to one document, they list space debris, and in those days only two countries had space projects. That was the United States and the Soviet Union. And then it says unidentified flying objects in the same document. So when this incident happened, two officers from the Defense Attaché Office, which were stationed in La Paz, the capital of Bolivia, somehow showed up in this remote area. And unfortunately for them, as they were coming in the airport, they were photographed by a local reporter. And the picture, you can see them, they're trying to hide their faces, but there they were photographed, and the picture was published in the press. So the cover story is that they were on vacation. But that's not a type of city you go on vacation. Number one, they were not with their wives, so obviously that was a cover story and a pretty bad one. Nevertheless, this was in a very remote area. We only have probably a very partial file from the US. There's only a few documents. I'm sure there's plenty more. Where the case gets a little murky is as to whether something was really retrieved and taken back to the US, or it may still be there because it was in an extremely remote area and there had been like a landslide on a mountain. There was an expedition initially by the army, by the Bolivian army, under a lieutenant, and they finally got to the area, but they didn't have the equipment and the facilities to do something. And there are some rumors that something was retrieved and taken to the United States, but then according to an American reporter who did investigate this case, his name was Bob Pratt, he's now deceased, he thinks that they never did retrieve because it was such a remote area, so that object might still be there. But again, it shows that there is an interest on the part of the United States, and we have uncovered some documents, but there's probably much more.
Thank you. Colonel Sanchez.
En el caso de Uruguay,
In the Uruguayan case, as regards UFO investigation, there is no official exchange with the United States. The only exchanges that we have had with the United States have been, it was the recovery in 2011 of a Star engine Delta II, which fell over our airspace. I personally went to recover that object, but as regards UFO issues, we have no exchange agreement with them, nor have we carried out any official exchange with them.
Bueno, en el caso
In the case of my country, I understand that this takes place at two levels. The public level, in which the Air Force office is in charge of this through the public relations, but I understand that at another level there is an official exchange of information, and this is a constant exchange of information. We can see, because afterwards we can see that information does make it to the United States. When there are UFO crashes, for example, in the case that we mentioned before, the San Mato de Huancho in 1980, unfortunately, there are no official documents. Everything is at a secret level, but we have received many testimonies on exchange of information.
Any participation of our either intelligence or military, any other part of our government in investigations of UFOs in your country?
I'm not aware of any official U.S. involvement on the UFO issue, but we do know that in the intelligence change, there is an exchange of information between the intelligence bodies. Anytime there's a new event, there is an exchange of information to update the intelligence communities on these issues.
Mr. Chimetti.
Yes, well, regarding, as I explained to the Senator, in matter of ufology, on research, I'm not aware of any documentation exchange between Argentina and United States. But regarding to other agencies as NASA, well, NASA has in several cases of Argentina is a place where it's a lot of space junk, it's a lot of debris, satellites coming from international, also other countries. And I researched many cases where many debris coming, but different kind of procedures. In the case of NASA, yes, they asked for particular cases if they were part of American missions, and it was a few cases of retrieval, yes, but we were talking about only space debris.
Oh, thank you. It's very interesting that there's apparently a different attitude on their part if it's outside this country. Within our country is total denial, but if they really believe that, then they wouldn't be participating in these investigations in South America. Mr. Guevara, you have mentioned that Operation Saucer was shut down. Is that simply because it then went underground, it then went secret? They continued the investigation, but secret now?
The main reason why the Operation Saucer was shut down was because there was an actual contact among the military, William Jolanda, the captain that was commanding the Operation Saucer, and an extraterrestrial creature. It took place on mid-December 1977, and as part of his duties, the commander of the Operation Saucer has to go back to his commander, a brigadier in the city of Belém, and report weekly what was going on during the Operation Saucer. And when he did that week, then when he informed to his superior that he had an actual encounter with a creature, 2 arms, 2 legs, a body, a head, with a helmet that came from a UFO 300 feet long that almost landed close to the Guajará-Mirim River. When we reported that to the Brigadier Protásio de Oliveira, his commander, then William Jolanda was given order to shut down Operation Saucer and return all material and bring all his men from the jungle to the city and give it all the material, all the information. Then we realized, we knew, I've been seeking information about it for quite 20-some years. I have gathered lots of information about it in my pursuit for details of this, that the Operations Saucer changed its name, changed its personnel. All those 3,000 men that were commanded by Wood and Yolanda were taken off the scene, and the new personnel took the operation under a different name and under U.S. military command from several months after December 1977.
Thank you. One quick question to Colonel Santa Maria. What would be the...
You have less than 1 minute.
Less than 1 minute. I saw that. Thank you. I saw that. What would be the arguments for and against the suggestion that what you were dealing with was kind of like a giant hologram rather than something physical? Your bullets had no effect on it. I'm just asking, you know, if that was the argument, that could it have been a kind of a giant hologram, what would be the arguments for that? What would be the arguments against that?
Well, it'd be difficult for it to be a hologram because I saw it from different angles. And when it moved, a hologram could change. It could change shape, but the colors were very solid. It was a real object. This was not a hologram.
We can't understand if, in fact, there was no effect of bullets on it. I'm just curious about, you know, we're dealing with phenomena here that that we cannot explain in terms of our physics and so forth here. And I'm just wondering what the various options are. Thank you all very much. Are we going to have a second round? I have some additional questions.
We will probably have a very short round. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. One question per person, however. Thank you very much for being here today. Great testimony.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from each one of you what's the attitude. Here it is, well, if you believe in unidentified flying objects, or you believe that there's spacecraft that comes in, there's been such a damper by both the press and our government about believing this. I mean, you're sort of made fun of if you look at this and say, yes, this is real. What's the attitude of both the people and your press? And we'll start with Mr. Joran.
Thank you. This is definitely not a matter of belief. There is a lot of data that has been produced by civilian UFO researchers, military UFO researchers, a very few but very dedicated scientists for the last 60 years to confirm without any question at all that we are being visited by several species of more advanced, at least technologically more advanced civilization that come here, and as objects that they design, they construct, like a Boeing does this, its airplanes here, they must have something like that in their planets, and they visit other planets in the universe. It is as simple as thinking what we are doing presently. We are at this very moment on Mars, on Moon, taking photo of satellites of Uranus, of the rings of Jupiter, of whatever. We are exploring our backyard. The difference is that our technology presently only allow us to explore this backyard. But if we're doing this now, in 2013, in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years perhaps, we will be able to do interplanetary trips with crews inside our spaceships, safely, effectively, go and come back. So if we can do this in the near future, and we're working on that, definitely, this advanced civilization that started the evolutionary process much before us, they are doing the same. And they may have been doing the same for quite some time, perhaps hundreds of years, thousands of years, we don't know. The universe is so full of life, and the variety of this life, in the formats and levels of evolutionary process, it's just unthinkable for us at this point. But we are grasping the surface of this. We are doing history here. We are doing what we are supposed to do, to question and to whatever we find out, take to the society, make the society know that we are being visited. Because we may very well, at any point, receive their visitation in an open and frank way. And the world has to be prepared for that. It's not out of question that one day we will exchange with them, we'll engage, we'll live with other societies from other planets. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Antonio?
Yes. Well, you're asking about the social attitude of the public and the press
Yeah.
in Latin America. I would say, in general, it is much more open than in the United States. Whenever there is an important UFO case, it gets covered in mainstream newspapers. So if it would be like here being covered by the Washington Post, by the New York Times, but seriously, or at least semi-seriously. I mean, there is some ridicule, of course, but not as bad as the U.S. The scientific community, on the other hand, has been very conservative, generally speaking, in Latin America. I would say that there might be more scientists quietly doing research in the U.S. than in Latin America, although that is changing. Now that they see these official commissions, then that gives them some cover.
Right.
If some general that is attached to the Civil Aviation Agency asks professors from the universities, then that gives them cover. But in the past, it was curious to see that the press and the general public and the governments were more open, but the scientific community was more closed.
Interesting.
They were just afraid, maybe, because the peer pressure is always bad. And one thing that General Bermudez told me, which I found it very interesting, is that he said the pilots, the airline pilots, were very cautious. Normally, because, in the past, airline pilots, they never wanted to report UFOs publicly because it may affect their career.
Right.
They don't want to be known as the UFO nut, you know that. So he said they're trying to condition them that it's okay. I mean, after all, this committee is from the Civil Aviation, and these are official forms. But he said they're still, it's easier for them from the military pilots, because if their commander tells a military pilot, here's a report, you fill the form, then officers follow orders, right? But the airline pilots is still volunteer. But the fact that this agency is with the Civil Aviation, that is also changing. And of course, because they are with the Civil Aviation, that's their primary source of information. Usually comes from pilots who are, in the course of their flying, they're seeing something. They don't know if that is another air traffic or is something else. So they will call the control tower, says, well, I see an object, in that corner. Do you have an air traffic? And then usually the control tower, well, in some cases they probably do, and then that's filed away and it's not a UFO case. But in other cases, they don't. So then the control tower says, no, we have no scheduled traffic there. And these communications are recorded and preserved. In the old days, probably they were erased after a while, but now they're preserved. And then there's official reporting forms that the committee gives them. And then, but it is still up to airline pilots. That part is still volunteer, whether they want to fill the report or not. So they have to be conditioned. But they're being conditioned by the government, so hopefully that will change.
Colonel Sanchez?
Well, I wanted to tell you that the Uruguayan Air Force does not rule out the hypothesis that these are extraterrestrials. This phenomenon is one that we've seen occur in Uruguayan airspace. It could be different probes, something else, but we need scientific evidence to prove it. That's why our commission works using scientific methodologies, but we do so through the Air Force. I believe that people's attitude and the media's attitude in Uruguay are very respectful, given the fact that for 33 years the Air Force has been spearheading UFO investigations in Uruguay. And so I believe that the Uruguayan people have reliable and transparent official information and understand that. The situation in each country is different. In the case of Brazil, United States, these are massive countries with large tracts of land and very sophisticated defense systems. It's not the same in Uruguay. Uruguay doesn't develop weapons. We don't have special aeronautic or space research. So I think that's why there's greater acceptance. However, in the case of the United States, it's something that we all know. Defense is very important, and so they have to keep some secrets when it comes to sharing information. I've heard people mention over these days that these UFOs could be a new prototype of an unmanned aircraft, and that might make things difficult for the Department of Defense, or especially for companies that build these, Lockheed or Boeing. And that's why I believe that there are greater reservations, and I think that that's natural in terms of sharing information, as in terms of what's been flying around out there. That's at least my personal opinion.
Yes.
Yes, you were talking about how about believing or not in UFOs. I support what our colleague from Brazil said. It's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of information. The information is out there, and over these 5 days we've been talking about it very openly. However, and I'm struck by that how this is addressed in the United States. They underscore the fact that these civilizations are potentially aggressive, the nuclear aspects of this. That's very interesting because we don't look at it that way. It seems like that there might be politically correct extraterrestrials, because they might be offensive in some way. But in Peru, when we hear about cases of encounters, we have very credible testimony of people who've had contact in many different cases, but it's always been with civilizations where there have been attempts made at engaging and having communication. If you look at the case of Santa Maria, where there was this quote-unquote clash, and where all of the ammo was fired, you would expect a response from the others, but there was none. It seemed like it was like a cat and mouse game. And if they wanted to destroy us, they would, clearly with their technology, they would have been able to do that, and they haven't done it. So I think our approach is very different. It's not, we look at superior technology, but not in military framework. But there are many visits that we're receiving. We have to look at it. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to explain it scientifically yet.
Very much for your comments. Colonel?
Yes, just with respect for how the media treats us when there's a UFO case. I've worked with many airlines and crews, and I would say that starting in the 90s, pilots talk very openly about experiences that they've had, what they've seen, what they've heard, because, again, nobody makes fun of you or laughs at you. It's very normal now to talk about sightings, and that doesn't have any impact whatsoever on someone's career, and I'm very pleased that that's the case.
With Argentina, I have 3 decades as a journalist, international, and I saw evolution. When I started, the media was more kind of aseptic, and was hard to be interviewed, was hard to kind of open this Pandora box of the subject. But I saw it's all over the world. Everything is changing. For example, with series as the History Channel, Ancient Aliens, or UFO Hunters, the people is kind of totally more open. Today, for example, we are discovering planets similar to the Earth every day in the news. It's incredible how the astronomy and the exobiology is every day in your breakfast table in the newspaper. And that attitude also help with the UFOs too. And for example, regarding with the pilots, it's interesting how the Latin American pilots are so open. Every time I travel, I go to the cockpit to talk with the pilots, and the pilots have experiences different to the United States, who the pilots are more shy. I said, what happened? We have only activities south of the border and not here?
Yeah.
It's interesting. See, sometimes I feel ridiculous asking, but I always go also to the airline I travel in, United American Airlines. I said, no, they don't talk too much. But I think it's a totally paradigm shift. It's a shift now in all levels of consciousness. And I think it's positive for the new generations. When I was growing up as a ufologist, yeah, my own family was kind of, so, oh, no, he liked these subjects, and they were not kind of accepting that, also the media. But I think it's totally a new hope for all of us.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one question from each panel member, if you have one.
I have a question, and Dr. Choi was absolutely my straight man on this one. My question is to you, Colonel Santa Maria. There was a phenomena in the surprise that the object, the UFO, was not attacking back. And would you respond to that?
Yes, it was like a peaceful attitude. When I began to attack it, it evaded the fire, but it never did I feel a threat that it was going to respond by attacking me. It's simply when my fuel was out, I just approached it and saw that it was an object that was unknown to me. I just went to see what it was, and I had to turn my back to return to the base. I thought, I don't know, maybe it's going to start chasing me now, but nothing of the sort happened.
Wait, no, it is, excuse me, Representative Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Colonel Sanchez and Dr. Choi, what kind of scientific information do you seek that would verify the phenomenon?
Well, we in theory have no idea what it is we're actually investigating, so we use scientific methods to conduct our investigations. I can say that in 1993, we saw two luminous spheres hovering over a field in the interior part of Uruguay. These luminous spheres that measured about 30 or 40 centimeters, no more than that. They left prints where scientifically, through laboratory studies, we saw a diminishment of phosphorus and zinc and magnesium. So samples were taken from where it had touched the soil. We saw there were 8 different tracks there, and again there was a reduction in phosphorus, zinc, and magnesium. We continue to use scientific methods to investigate in an attempt to see if this was reminiscent of any type of other interaction we've seen, or because of the color, the energy, but we don't know because we don't have anything else to analyze. However, we continue to work on projects that have been underway for several years. We're working with Norway in an analysis of lights that have been seen hovering over Uruguay, over dams, in mountainous areas of rivers where there have been witnesses. We have photographs. We're trying to conduct a film and photographic analysis. And again, we're also working with Chile on this. We have a written agreement between the Uruguayan and the Chilean Air Force in the sharing of information and data. And Uruguay and Chile have a joint investigation of UFOs on Easter Island. In my particular case, when I was working with the Peruvian Air Force, I was cooperating with them in their UFO office. The focus was on serious, formal, scientific investigations. We were given questionnaires. It showed us how we were supposed to interview people. Then we had to cross this information with weather data, etc. But this morning, I was talking about the Chulucana incident. We saw these spheres of light that moved intelligently because they interacted with the people. When people tried to approach, they saw the spheres approaching, then going back to where they were. And so it defied conventional science. And we sought explanations. We investigated for 3 years and saw the only way of understanding this phenomenon, again, escaped traditional scientific canons, in that it was possible that we had to look for new possibilities. And in a conference, I was saying that the only problem is if it's 73 million light years away, how do you continue to analyze it? And in 2010, there was a home in Lima, the capital of Peru, where there was a phenomenon where things started flying, floating around, things exploded, and there was a cell phone from the home's owner. It was found in another house, and 25 people saw how that particular cell phone disappeared from one house and appeared in another house. And it wasn't that it flew from one place. It disappeared from point A and reappeared in point B. This is something like teleporting from science fiction, but it had witnesses. People call this paranormal phenomenon, which is almost like a cuss word in sciences, but we have to look at ways to try to understand these phenomena.
Thank you. Representative Cook?
Yes, Colonel Santa Maria, I'd like to ask you, so that we can do due diligence on any possible other explanation or hologram explanation, for example, could you tell us what your air squad commander ordered you to do that day? How many people on the ground witnessed the globe as you've described it initially as about 600 meters above the Earth, at about 5 kilometers away from the base, and particularly interested in how long, at speeds that you described as 1.6, up to 1.6 Mach speed, you did this, you kept this globe in your sights?
When this balloon observed, there were 1,800 people who were in our morning formations. And so they visually saw this globe. Radar had not detected it. And I was ready to fly. And so I got the order that there's an object that's not responding to radio communications. It's not on the radar. We thought it might be spy equipment, and it was in restricted airspace for civilian flights. So I was given the order, this could be a spy object, and so I was given the order to pursue it. And so if it did not move away, that I was supposed to engage it with fire. So 1,800 people witnessed it, but 400 people were in combat positions that if it started to attack, that they would intervene. So as I fired and it moved away from the base, the other 400 kept their position. They remained on standby, but and they saw that it moved up in the air and the object moved away. So I chased it. I think it was 1,800 people who saw this very clearly.
Senator,
I have no further questions. I just want to congratulate the panel coming forward because you have added a very unusual dimension to what we've been trying to prove, and that is that our government has not been straightforward with it, the American people. So thank you for helping us prove that case.
Representative Bartlett?
Our chair has asked 2/3 of the question that I was anxious to ask. And the question I was going to ask was, would you tell us, just go down the line and tell us the attitudes of your people, your press, and your military and government? And you've asked the question about the people and the press. So let me just ask the question. I want just a one-word answer from you. Where your military and your government is on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is open and accepting and investigative, and 10 is denial and ridicule. Our country is pretty close to 10. Tell us on that scale where your countries are. Just a number.
Just a number. Being 0 total openness.
Yeah,
and
1 or
10
0
ridicule.
total openness, right, yeah.
I would say we are 3.
3, pretty good.
2, 3.
Okay.
Well, after this, the Foz do Iguaçu letter and the recent meeting at the Ministry of Defense in Brazil 2 weeks ago, only 2 weeks ago, maybe we can go an upgrade to 1.
That's fantastic.
I don't know.
Well, I think that we have to distinguish between the recognition that the UFO phenomenon is real and the extraterrestrial hypothesis, because that's another step. So in the terms of the acceptance of UFOs as a real phenomenon, I mean, we have the statement from General Bermudez. Another important ufologist in Chile from the Army is Major Bravo, who was with the aviation branch of the Army. That would be a 0, a 1. They totally recognize that the UFO phenomenon is real. But the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that's another question, because then you would have to have a body or a piece of metal or something that really could be proven. So there, I don't know, they admit the possibility, but there I would say maybe a 6 or 7 as far as the ET part. But the UFO, total acceptance that it's a real phenomenon and that it may pose possibly a threat to aviation, and that is something that governments should take seriously, absolutely. In South America, that is accepted today.
La visión en Uruguay.
The vision in Uruguay, from the point of view of the Uruguayan Air Force, I would say it's 0, because Uruguay, through its Air Force and UFO Investigation Commission, it even welcomed the idea of extraterrestrials as a possibility. However, there are 40 cases, again, that we've been unable to resolve because of how odd they are. And you have civilian pilots, military pilots that have chased these UFOs and have taken photographs. So I would say the openness in Uruguay means that people have a good image of what the information we're providing is. They believe it's reliable. And again, we use scientific methods because there's no other way to do it from our point of view. And the groups that address UFOs, like spiritual groups that are also working and investigating this, accept what we are proposing. And we've even held a conference in 2012 where we invited all of the groups in Uruguay that do these investigations. I think people were very happy, and I think there was acceptance. Thank you very much.
Bien.
Thank you, Congressman. Before giving my response, I would like to clearly state that I profoundly love my country, Peru, and I profoundly respect the armed forces of my country. In fact, they gave me the opportunity to work with them, and I profoundly admire the American people here as well. I want that to be very clear before I respond. What you're asking me is very complex, because at the moment when the Peruvian government decided to open this investigation office, they were admitting that there was a reality to this. And they're not going to open an office on unicorns and ghosts. No, that's not what we're doing here. But on the other hand, this has been going on for 13 years, and we have seen minimal results. And when I talk to the military personnel, they say that they have seen UFOs, but they can't come out publicly and say it because there is a policy that has not yet opened up. And so I would say that that's why I couldn't give it a 10, but that would just be my response.
And the extraterrestrial hypothesis open, but for in the history of our traditions, for example, in 1968, the president of Argentina, General Onganía, said, I believe in the flying saucers. Yo creo en los platos voladores. That openness always exists. In that case, was a president of a nation. But the government is investigating the UFOs with scientifically correctness in this moment. And in the future, maybe it will be some pronunciation. That is it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank our panel for being here today. This has been really interesting, and your openness and what's happening in each of your countries has been, I think, a real eye-opener for the rest of us. And with that, I'm going to conclude this hearing. We will be back here at 1:45. Meeting adjourned.